everybody, welcome back to the Schwobo Studio. Today in our reed making series we are going to pre-process some cane before we actually gouge. So that's going to entail splitting our tube cane, checking its radius, and then actually guillotining the cane to length. But before we do that, let me just mention a couple of things. You typically will buy your tube cane in quarter pounds, half pounds, or pounds in this country. Other countries it would be kilos. And it really depends on your climate what kind of cane is going to work best for you. So one nice thing about, there's a company called Capital Cane and their link is on our website. You can kind of do a sampler pack and try some different hardnesses and densities, and they measure all of those things for you. So if you don't know what kind of cane is going to work well in your climate, you can do one of these sample packs and sort of see what works best for you where you are. So in this climate in Columbus, Georgia, we usually use a diameter of 10.5 to 11, and that's for a couple of different reasons. We are using an Inaletti gouger here, and actually most of the gouging machines that I've used in my reed making career have all been machines that set up a reed that's more open, so we're working to control the aperture down a little bit. So the larger the diameter of the cane, the more closed the aperture is actually going to be. The smaller the diameter of the cane, the more open the reed is going to be. So usually your choices are going to be between 10 and 11. Some people even go down as small as 9.5 or up as large as, let's see, 11.5. But for us here in Columbus, 10.5 to 11 is pretty safe for us. So again, you'll have to sort of experiment with that just a little bit. If you're in higher altitudes, then you're going to need something with a smaller diameter because your reeds are going to close up on you. Here in Columbus, it's pretty warm and humid most of the year, so that helps our reeds stay nice and open. And like I said, our Inaletti machine, gouging machine, lends itself to a reed that's just a little bit more open. So today we're going to need a splitter, and I've got two here to show you. So we need a splitter and some kind of a radius gauge and a guillotine to actually chop the cane to length. So I'm just going to show you, I've got two choices here. This is actually my personal splitter. So it's just a rod with a handle, and it's got three sharp little blades on it that you will actually put into the center of the cane and then sort of force it through. And this splitter is actually the one that belongs to the oboe studio here. And you can see it's the same thing. We've got those sharp blades inside. But the nice thing about this is that it's kind of self-contained, so you won't hurt yourself, even if you're really clumsy and prone to injury. This one is my personal one, so I'm going to go ahead and use this one because I'm just used to it. But I really prefer this for my students because they can't cut themselves in any way. So I'm just going to set this guy aside. What else is really helpful is to have a towel. I usually have a towel on my lap for all segments of my reed making, but for right here, I like to actually create a little bit of a pad, a cushion on the table, because you're going to jam the splitter into the cane pretty forcefully. So I'm just going to show you initially, just start out, you're going to just get everything nice and secure here. I'm going to move this hand out of the way in just a second, you'll see, but I'm sort of tapping till it splits a little bit, and then really just kind of jam the splitter through, and your pieces might fly all over the place, and that's totally fine. So I'll go ahead and show you one. Yeah, that's what Thomas is for. He can pick up all of my pieces that fly around. Thank you, Thomas. I'll show you with this school splitter. Again, I just tap a little bit, and then you just kind of jam the tool down over the cane. You need to do this kind of quickly, because if you go too slow, there's a good chance that the tool is going to twist on you, and you'll end up with a piece of cane that's all crooked and twisted. So you do need to kind of do that pretty quickly. So let me show you one more time, and then I've got this special piece of cane out because I want to show you something about that piece of cane. So you can sort of assess what the piece of cane looks like. You know, this is stuff that's grown in nature, so nothing is perfect. So you're never going to have a perfectly round sphere on your tube cane. So you can kind of pick and choose where you want to place the splitter. This piece looks pretty good, so I'm just going to go ahead and get that one split. Now this piece of cane, I'm going to try to jump over to this camera so I can show you what I'm talking about here. There's a little bit of a point you can kind of see here. I wouldn't want that in the middle of a piece of cane, because that's actually going to give me a piece of cane with a really small diameter and this kind of funky crease in it. So I'm going to line up one of the blades of the splitter right on that piece so it doesn't end up right in the middle of a piece of cane. One thing I should mention, when you're processing your cane before you gouge, you're going to end up throwing away a lot of it, and that's okay. You consider it you being in charge of your quality control. You could actually run every single piece through your gouging machine and try to make a read on every single piece of cane that you process, but it's going to be a waste of your time because a lot of it's not going to be good enough. So you need to start looking for quality. So because I can see a little bit better with my tool, I'm just going to line up one of my blades right on that little crease. Give it a couple of taps till it gives, and then go ahead and just kind of jam it all down. So we have a nice little pile of cane here. If I were doing this for real, I would probably grab, I don't know, 20 or 30 pieces of tube cane and go ahead and split them all one after the next, just because you start to compartmentalize a little bit so you can not spend all of the hours of every single day processing cane and making reeds. We want to try to be as efficient as we can, but still take enough time to ensure that we have good quality materials. So I'm going to just move my towel out of the way here. And so the next thing we're going to do is check for our diameter. So even though we have ordered, you know, our lovely little 1/4 pound of cane here, 10.5 to 11, although I think this one might be 10 to 10.5, Thomas. Doesn't matter, but we want to check it because, again, it's not perfect. You know, the folks at the double reed shop, wherever you're ordering your cane, are going to check to make sure it gets sorted into the right bundle, but you want to be your own quality control again. So you just want to check everything over and over and over again. So I want to throw my glasses on here, and I have three. Actually, I can take these off for just a second. I have 3 different radius gauges here to show you, and they all work just as well as the next. This is actually the one that I learned with. You sort of hold it this way. I kind of like it because it looks like a little ducky, so we actually call it the little ducky. And this is set so we are measuring to see if any of our pieces of cane are larger or smaller than 11, because in our gouging machines the beds are typically set at 11 for us in the States, and we don't want anything too much larger than that or too much smaller than that. So this is one option. I have this other one that it's actually good for both oboe and English horn, and maybe if we see on this camera, you can see that it has different sort of half moons here. So we've got 9.75, 10, 10.25, 10.5, and then you flip it over and it's got larger sizes for English horn. So if you really wanted to know more precisely what you had, you could fit your piece of cane to those half circles and figure out exactly what your diameter is. And then I have this last one, which is kind of similar to the little ducky, where it's just 11, and it helps me know if my cane is larger than 11, which if it is, I don't use it. If it's a little bit smaller, that's okay, but if it's too much smaller, you don't want to use it. And this is actually the little radius gauge that comes with the Cooney Bear gouging machine, so that's why I have that one as well. But I'm going to go ahead and use the little ducky. And what we are looking for, I usually like to have my lamp out for all parts of the reed making process. And I slide the piece of cane backwards and forwards along the curve of the half moon. And what I'm looking for when I hold it up to the light is if there's any light, I'm not sure which one is better angle here, this one might be, underneath the bottom of the piece of cane. And if there is, this one actually looks pretty good. Let me see if I can find one. That is, I may not be able to because this is a little bit smaller cane. Yeah, I think the nice thing about the capital cane is it's very consistent, so we don't have anything that's larger. But if there was a lot of light showing underneath the bottom of the middle of the piece of cane, that means that it's a lot larger than 11, and you actually don't want to use that. Some people will put this aside and use it for their English horn reeds, and I think that's totally fine. For me, that's a diameter that's a little too small for English horn reeds. So you can see this one, you can actually see a little bit of light. that in that section of the cane, it's actually larger than 11. So we definitely don't want to use that. So I would put that piece away, or I would throw it away, and I'm gonna put it right here. So I'm just gonna quickly double check all of these, and if you notice, I go through the entire piece of cane. So I'm looking for any light that's under the bottom middle of the curve, or if it's too narrow and it would be, you know, really, really skinny and you would see a bunch of light on either side of the little ducky, that means your diameter is really, really small. And you could still make a reed from that, but you might want to put it in a separate pile. So if you're making reeds with small diameter cane and you love it, then you know you like small diameter cane. But if you're making reeds with stuff that's more consistent to 11, then you're just kind of keeping track of all of the variables. There are so many variables when you're making reeds that you want to try to keep everything as consistent as possible. And when you're sorting your cane, that's diameter. So have different piles or different drawers for 10 to 10 and a half, or definitely 10 and a half, 10 and a half to 11, 11. Anything smaller or larger typically is not going to work so well if you're at elevation and you're making reeds American style. So we've split our cane and we've checked the radius, we've checked the diameter, and all of these pieces are good except for this one lone little piece, so we're going to set him aside so he doesn't influence the others to get too large. And so the next step that we're going to cover in this segment is guillotining the cane. So you need to cut the piece of cane to length so it'll fit in the gouging machine. And this can be a little bit different depending on what machine you have. With the Ross machine, with the Cooney Bear, those are the ones I'm most familiar with, they actually have sort of a built-in guillotine right on the machine. The Inaletti that we have here at Columbus State came with a separate guillotine, which I have right here, so I'm going to swing that around onto the table. And you need a C-clamp to secure. And so you can see that this works. So here's the little arm of the guillotine, and there's a blade underneath at the bottom. Do you need me to turn?
That's good.
Good. All right, and so on this particular guillotine, this arm swings out, and this is where you want to butt the piece of cane up against the end of this arm, and you'll chop here. So this piece towards me is what will get discarded. So before you do that though, you can actually look at your piece of cane. So we've already checked the diameter, but now we actually need to check to see how straight the piece of cane is, and looking for you know, any weirdnesses. This piece of cane you can kind of see has a little bit of a ridge in the middle, which will kind of get swiped out when we're gouging. But things to notice, this piece of cane, I don't know if you can see this, Thomas, tends to get a little bit smaller towards the left side here, a little more consistent on the right side. So when I guillotine, I'm actually going to chop that off, because if I were to take this segment, then I'm making a reed that has an inconsistent diameter, and that's just going to cause some weirdness. So you want to try to keep things as consistent as possible. So I'm going to put this towards me. I'm going to butt it all the way up, and then really you just sort of jam down that arm and it cuts it to length. And so I like to sort of keep this little piece, I'm just going to throw away, I've got my trash can right here. I'm going to kind of keep things separated so I know this is all my good cane. Again, sometimes you get a piece of cane like this, which is pretty wavy. So you can see this piece of cane is not very straight at all. So I'm looking at it to see, I don't see a straight piece of cane in there. Even if I clipped off a little on each end, it's still pretty wavy. So I usually break any piece of cane that I'm going to throw away, because sometimes when you're working over a trash can, stuff will fall in the trash can, and then you don't know, if you don't break it, you don't know, like, if was that the good piece that just fell in, or do I have to check every single piece all over again? So it's a habit for me to just break anything that I'm throwing in the trash can. Okay, this piece of cane, if we can try to zoom in on that, I just want to point out it has a lot of ridges, and you can kind of see it wasn't as smooth as that first piece of cane. So this may not be as good a quality piece of cane. The color is a little bit lighter too. These are all things you sort of take note of, because color has to do with age of cane. Sometimes cane is older, sometimes it's younger. You don't want it to be too young or too old. You sort of want something that's aged appropriately, but too old is not good either. So this piece is pretty curvy too, so I'm actually going to try to take a little bit off of this end and then flip it over and hope that we get the straightest part of that, which is pretty good. And let's see, I'm going to try to, so you can take from different sides, which is what you're going to see me do with a lot of these pieces, because it's hard to find a perfectly straight piece of cane. And I get a couple more here. That's pretty curvy, I don't know. We'll try. Yeah, I'm gonna break that one. So it might seem like I throw a lot away, but really all I'm doing is saving myself some headache later on down the road, because these pieces that aren't straight or have varying diameters, they're either not gonna pass through your gouging machine, or you're going to try to make a read out of it and it's going to be giving you all kinds of funky results, and you're going to try to diagnose what's going on when really the main piece, or the main problem, is the piece of cane and not necessarily the reed maker. That one's very curvy. And this one's pretty good. Okay, so we have successfully split and checked our diameter and guillotined some cane, and so that's all we're going to do for today. But like I said, when I normally sit down to do this, I'll do, you know, a good 30 pieces of tube cane, which is a lot of cane, because then you're getting about 3 pieces from each tube. So we will see you for our next segment, which will be gouging. So we'll see you then.